Jonas Vex sat in the dimly lit bar, staring at his half-empty drink. His ship, the Star Runner, was in bad shape. The engine needed repairs, the fuel was low, and worst of all, he had no money left. He had made too many bad deals, and now debt collectors were breathing down his neck. A fat, slimy alien named Gorak sat across from him, grinning with sharp yellow teeth. Gorak was a merchant, but not the honest kind. He traded in rare and sometimes illegal goods. Jonas had dealt with him before, but this time he needed something more than just cheap cargo. He needed a miracle. "You owe me credits, Vex," Gorak said, swirling his green drink. "A lot of credits." Jonas sighed. "I just need more time." "No more time," Gorak snapped, "but I have an offer for you." Jonas leaned forward. He didn't trust Gorak, but he had no choice. "I'm listening." Gorak's grin widened. He snapped his fingers, and from the shadows, a hooded figure stepped forward slowly. The hood was pulled back, revealing a woman, but not a human woman. She had pale blue skin, silver eyes, and long dark hair that shimmered under the bar's neon lights. Her face was delicate, her expression calm, but her eyes held something strange, something dangerous. "This," Gorak said, "is Heire. She is a maid, a fine worker, smart, skilled. She will serve you well." Jonas frowned. "I don't need a maid, I need credits." "She is worth more than credits," Gorak said. "Take her as payment, you clear your debt, and she works for you, a fair trade." Jonas looked at the woman. She stood perfectly still, not speaking, not protesting. There was something off about this. Why would Gorak trade a living person? Why did she not resist? "This feels wrong," Jonas muttered. Gorak laughed. "Wrong? You think too much, Vex. She is a servant, she obeys, and she is better than any machine you can buy." Jonas hesitated. He didn't trust Gorak, but he also knew that if he refused, he might not leave this bar alive. He glanced at Heire again. "Can you cook?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, her voice smooth and controlled. "Can you fix ship engines?" "Yes." Jonas sighed. "Fine, I'll take her." Gorak clapped his hands. "A smart choice, Vex, but a warning, take good care of her. She is more valuable than you think." Jonas narrowed his eyes. "What does that mean?" Gorak just smiled. "The mysterious maid." As Jonas and Heire walked through the crowded spaceport, he kept glancing at her. She moved with grace, her steps quiet, her expression unreadable. Unlike most servants, she didn't act afraid, desperate, or submissive. "Where are you from?" Jonas asked. Heire did not answer immediately. "Far from here," she finally said. Jonas frowned. That was not an answer. "Why did Gorak give you away?" Again, she hesitated. "I was sold to him. He no longer needed me." Jonas didn't believe that for a second. Something was off. He decided not to push her, at least not yet. When they reached the Star Runner, Jonas opened the hatch and let Heire step inside. The ship wasn't in great condition. The walls were scratched, the floor was dirty, and the smell of burned wiring filled the air. "This is where you work now?" Jonas said. Heire looked around and nodded. "Understood." Jonas ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I don't know what your story is, but let's get one thing clear. I'm not your master and you're not my slave. You work here, that's all." Heire's silver eyes met his. "Understood." Something about the way she said it made Jonas uneasy. That night, Jonas lay in his small bunk, unable to sleep. Something about Heire kept bothering him. Gorak's words echoed in his mind. "She is more valuable than you think." What did that mean? He decided to check the ship's logs. He wanted to see if Heire had any record, anything that could tell him who she really was. He pulled up the security feed from the ship's cameras. Heire was in the engine room. Jonas frowned. What was she doing there? He zoomed in. She moved like a professional, her hands gliding over the controls, adjusting the settings with precision. And then Jonas saw something that made his blood run cold. Heire lifted her hand. The controls responded to her touch, but she didn't press any buttons. The wires moved on their own, shifting as if obeying her. Jonas sat up straight. That wasn't normal. That wasn't human. Who or what was Heire, and why did he have a terrible feeling that taking her was the biggest mistake of his life? The mysterious maid. Jonas Vex leaned back in his chair, staring at the ship's security footage. His pulse pounded in his ears. Zyra stood in the engine room, her fingers barely touching the metal panels. The ship's wiring moved on its own, twisting, shifting, responding to her touch as if obeying an invisible command. No tool, no interface, no command spoken, just her. Jonas clenched his jaw. He had been around the galaxy enough to know this wasn't normal. He had seen engineers work miracles with machines, but nobody controlled systems like this without direct input. He rewound the footage, watching again. Maybe it was a trick. Maybe he was just seeing things. But no, the wires twisted before her fingers made contact. His gut told him one thing: Zyra wasn't just a maid. Jonas shut off the screen and rubbed his face. This was bad, really bad. He had taken her from Gorak as part of a deal, thinking she was just an ordinary worker, but now a dangerous thought crept into his mind. If she isn't a maid, then what the hell is she? The next morning, Jonas walked into the ship's main deck, pretending nothing was wrong. Zyra was already awake, preparing breakfast in the small kitchenette. The smell of something warm and spicy filled the air, an aroma Jonas didn't recognize. She worked with silent efficiency, her silver eyes calm as she placed a steaming plate in front of him. Jonas hesitated. "What is this?" "A dish from my homeworld," she replied. Jonas eyed it suspiciously. "I don't eat poison if that's what you're thinking." A flicker of amusement crossed her face. "If I wanted to kill you, I would have done it already." Jonas nearly choked on his own breath. Zyra sat across from him, folding her hands neatly. "You have questions," she said. "Ask them." Jonas chewed the food, surprisingly good, then leaned forward. "All right, first question. What the hell were you doing in the engine room last night?" Zyra didn't flinch. "I was fixing the ship." Jonas narrowed his eyes. "Without tools." "I do not need tools." "That's not normal," Jonas said flatly. "I've been on 100 ships, worked with the best engineers in the galaxy, and I've never seen someone move wires without touching them." Zyra tilted her head. "Perhaps you have not met many of my kind." Jonas exhaled sharply. "I don't even know what kind you are." She held his gaze, her silver eyes unreadable. Then finally she spoke. "I am not a maid," she said. Jonas smirked. "Yeah, I figured that much." For the first time, her expression turned serious. "I did not lie," she continued. "I was sold as a servant, but that is not who I am. That is what I was forced to become." Jonas felt a chill. "Forced by who and why?" "All right," he said slowly. "Then tell me, who are you really?" Zyra looked down at her hands, as if considering her words carefully. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "I am Zyra Velen," she paused, "the last surviving heir of House Velen." Jonas frowned. "House Velen, that name sounds familiar." "It should," she said. "Before my family was betrayed, we controlled one of the richest trading empires in the galaxy." Jonas blinked. Riches, trading empire? That meant power, that meant danger. He exhaled, rubbing his temples. "So let me get this straight. You're not a maid, you're actually a runaway heiress worth a fortune." "Yes." Jonas let out a dry laugh. "And I just took you as payment from a shady merchant." Zyra's lips curled slightly. "Yes." Jonas muttered a curse. This was exactly the kind of trouble he didn't need. Danger lurking the moment Jonas realized what Zyra really was. Alarms went off in his head. If she was telling the truth, that meant powerful people were looking for her, and not just anyone, the kind of people who wouldn't hesitate to kill them for standing in their way. "We need to get you off my ship," Jonas said suddenly. Zyra raised an eyebrow. "No." Jonas stared at her. "No." "You accepted me as payment," she said simply. "That means you're responsible for me now." Jonas groaned. "I am not responsible for a runaway princess." "Heiress," Zyra corrected. "Whatever," Jonas waved his hands. "Look, I don't do well with high-profile situations. I run cargo, I trade junk. I don't get involved in royal family drama." Zyra leaned forward. "Then don't think of me as royalty, think of me as cargo." Jonas froze. Zyra's voice remained calm. "If you keep me hidden, I can pay you more than you've ever dreamed." My family's fortune is still out there, locked in vaults across the galaxy. If I survive, I can reclaim it. Jonas hesitated. He had heard stories like this before. Rich heiress, lost fortune, promises of wealth. Usually they ended with someone dead. Still, if she was telling the truth, this could be the biggest payday of his life. He exhaled. All right, let's say I believe you. What exactly are we running from? Zyra's silver eyes darkened. The people who destroyed my family. Jonas's gut twisted. A beep interrupted the moment. The ship's warning system lit up. Incoming transmission, Jonas checked the screen. His stomach dropped. It was an encrypted message, no ID, no origin, just a simple line of text. We know you have her. Surrender now. Jonas slowly turned to Zyra. You said you needed to stay hidden. Yes. Well, Jonas muttered, gripping the ship's controls. Looks like we're already too late for that. The screen flashed again. Multiple ships detected. Jonas swore under his breath. Outside the window, the cold black of space was no longer empty. They were surrounded. A deadly pursuit. Jonas' Vex gripped the controls of the Star Runner, staring at the radar screen. His pulse pounded in his ears. 5 enemy ships. They had come fast and silent, cutting off all escape routes. The ships hovered in the dark void of space like hungry predators waiting for their prey to make a mistake. Jonas swore under his breath. This was bad. He turned to Zyra. She stood near the co-pilot's seat, her expression calm, but her silver eyes flickered with something cold and unread. You recognize them? Jonas asked. She nodded once. They are hunters. Jonas tensed. Bounty hunters. No, she said quietly. Something worse. The comms crackled. A deep voice echoed through the cockpit. Pilot of the Star Runner, you are harboring stolen property. Surrender the girl and we will let you live. Jonas scoffed. Stolen property? That's funny. I didn't know people could be owned. The voice didn't respond right away. Do not test us, Captain Vex. You have 10 seconds. The radar flashed red. The enemy ships were locking weapons. Jonas turned to Zyra. Okay, princess, now would be a great time to tell me what the hell I'm dealing with. Zyra's eyes darkened. They are not bounty hunters, they work for the Syndicate. Jonas froze. The Syndicate. That was worse than he expected. The Syndicate wasn't just a criminal empire, it was an unstoppable one. Smugglers, assassins, corrupt politicians, and entire armies worked under their name. If they were after Zyra, it meant she wasn't just rich, she was important. And Jonas had just made himself target number 1. The comms crackled again. Time's up. A missile warning screamed across the dashboard. Jonas didn't hesitate. Hold on! He slammed the thrust controls, sending the Star Runner into a hard dive. The engines roared as the ship plunged downward, narrowly dodging an incoming missile. The explosion shook the ship, making the cockpit lights flicker. Zyra grabbed onto the console, her expression finally breaking into concern. They won't let us escape. Yeah, I figured that out already, Jonas growled, twisting the controls. Another ship swung in from the left, lasers firing. The blast sizzled past the hull, leaving scorch marks on the side. Jonas swerved between the enemy ships, trying to outmaneuver them. He wasn't a fighter pilot, but he had smuggled enough illegal cargo to know how to run. But the Syndicate, they were faster, they were stronger, and they weren't playing games. A desperate gamble. Zyra's hands moved quickly over the controls. We won't last in open space. We need a jump point. Jonas cursed. We're blocked in. They'll blow us apart before the drive can charge. Zyra looked up, her silver eyes flashing with something dangerous. Then we make them hesitate. Jonas barely had time to ask what she meant. Zyra reached out, and suddenly the ship's systems surged. The dashboard flickered, power readings spiked, and then the ship's external lights exploded, sending out a massive, blinding flash in all directions. The Syndicate ships faltered, their targeting systems scrambled. Jonas didn't know what Zyra just did, but he wasn't about to waste the chance. He punched the hyperdrive. The Star Runner lunged forward, engines screaming as it ripped through space. The world blurred into a swirling tunnel of light. Jonas exhaled sharply. They were gone for now. A dangerous secret. When the ship finally dropped out of hyperspace, the cockpit was dead silent. Jonas turned to Zaira, breathing hard. What the hell was that? She looked at him, unreadable. A trick. Jonas narrowed his eyes. That wasn't a trick. The ship responded to you like before. You didn't just overload the systems, you controlled them. Zaira didn't answer right away. Jonas leaned closer. Tell me the truth, Zaira, what are you? For the first time, he saw something flicker in her expression. Not fear, regret. Finally, she spoke. I am not just an heiress, she said softly. I am the last of my kind. Jonas frowned. Your kind. Zaira exhaled. My people were different from most species. We were not just traders. We were engineers, builders, creators. We understood machines in a way others did not. Jonas scoffed. So what, you have magic powers? No, Zaira said, shaking her head. Not magic, but a connection. Machines respond to us. We can manipulate them in ways others cannot. Jonas stared at her. If that was true, that meant Zaira wasn't just an heiress. She was a living weapon. That's why the syndicate wanted her. They didn't care about her wealth. They wanted her abilities. Jonas ran a hand down his face. This keeps getting worse. Zaira met his gaze. I told you I was valuable. Jonas barked a laugh. Yeah, you might have undersold that part. She leaned forward. Listen to me, Jonas. They will not stop hunting me. You saw how fast they found us. They have spies everywhere, and now you are part of this. Jonas sighed. He could have walked away. He could have dumped Zaira at the nearest station, let the syndicate deal with her. But that wasn't who he was. And besides, if Zaira was this valuable, that meant one thing: she was worth more alive than dead. He smirked. All right, princess. Looks like you and I just became business partners. Zaira raised an eyebrow. Business partners? Jonas stretched his arms. You said your family's fortune is still out there, right? Yes. Then let's go find it. Zaira studied him. And if the syndicate catches us first? Jonas grinned. Then we make them wish they hadn't. She gave a small smile. You are a rare man, Jonas Vex. Yeah, he said, starting the ship's engines, and you're my kind of trouble. The Star Runner roared to life, disappearing into the void. The hunt wasn't over, it was just beginning. A fortune in danger. The Star Runner soared through the vast darkness of space, a single ship against an empire that wanted it destroyed. Jonas Vex sat in the cockpit, one hand on the controls, the other tapping restlessly against the metal armrest. The syndicate had found them too fast last time. That meant two things. One, Zaira was even more important than she admitted, and two, someone was feeding them information. He turned his gaze toward the co-pilot's seat. Zaira Velen sat there, calm as ever, her silver eyes watching the swirling void of hyperspace. She had told him a lot. How her people once controlled a vast trading empire, how they had a unique bond with technology, how her entire family had been betrayed and slaughtered to keep her from reclaiming what was rightfully hers. But Jonas knew one thing for sure. There were still secrets she hadn't told him. The first clue. Jonas leaned forward, opening up the ship's nav system. All right, princess, you said your family's fortune is still out there. Where do we start looking? Zaira hesitated, then reached for the controls. With a few swift commands, a holographic star map appeared between them. A glowing red marker blinked over a sector Jonas knew too well. His jaw tightened. You're joking. Zaira shook her head. That is where the first vault is hidden. Jonas ran a hand down his face. News Prime, a criminal paradise, a lawless world where smugglers, warlords, and syndicate thugs do business. He exhaled sharply. You do realize flying straight into a viper's nest is a terrible plan, right? We don't have a choice, Zaira said. If we wait, the syndicate will find the vault before us. Jonas gritted his teeth. She was right. If they wanted to get their hands on her family's fortune, they had to move now. He punched the coordinates into the ship's drive. All right, next stop, News Prime. As the Star Runner leaped into hyperspace, Jonas had a sinking feeling in his gut. This was going to be a disaster. Landing in the Lion's Den. News Prime bloomed ahead, a massive industrial world covered in dark metal and neon lights. It was a place where deals were made, Lives were sold, and only the ruthless survived. Jonas guided the ship toward a landing zone in the lower city, a dangerous but discreet area. The moment they touched down, he turned to Heire. "We keep a low profile," he warned. "This place is crawling with syndicate informants." Heire nodded, understood. The moment they stepped off the ship, Jonas felt it. Eyes watching them. News Prime smelled of oil and decay. The streets were packed with alien merchants, bounty hunters, and outlaws. The air buzzed with flickering neon signs advertising everything from weapons to black market cybernetics. Jonas walked with purpose, Heire at his side. They had one goal: find the vault's location before the syndicate did. But as they moved deeper into the city, Jonas noticed something troubling. People were whispering as they passed. Some stared at Heire with recognition. Jonas clenched his fists. Someone here knows who she is. The vault's guardian. Heire led them to a rundown bar hidden in the back alleys. The inside was dark, filled with the stench of cheap liquor and burnt circuits. At the far end of the room sat a man, or rather, something that used to be a man. His body was half metal, half scar tissue, his cybernetic eye flickering with red light. Jonas recognized him immediately. Rake Torin, a vault keeper. Heire stepped forward. "We need access to the Velen vault." Rake let out a rough laugh. "You think I just give out keys to a dead dynasty?" Jonas sighed. "Look, buddy, let's skip the games. You know who she is. You know what she wants. Now either you help us or we take our business elsewhere." Rake's robotic eye scanned Heire. His face twitched. Then he grinned. "You should have stayed dead, little heir." Jonas's instinct screamed a warning. Too late. Rake slammed his fist on the table, activating an alarm. The bar doors slammed shut. A dozen armed mercenaries stepped forward, weapons drawn. Jonas groaned. "Why is it always a trap?" "The syndicate strikes." Heire moved first. Before anyone could fire, she flicked her wrist, and the lights in the room exploded in a shower of sparks. The mercenaries flinched. Jonas didn't hesitate. He grabbed his blaster and shot the first man in the chest. The room erupted into chaos, gunfire, shouting, the smell of burning circuits. Heire ducked behind cover, her silver eyes scanning for a way out. Jonas shot down another mercenary, then turned to Rake. "Where's the vault?" he demanded. Rake grinned, despite the barrel of a gun aimed at his head. "Too late, Vex. The syndicate already claimed it." Jonas's blood ran cold. They were too late. The fortune was already in enemy hands. Heire's expression darkened. "No," she said softly, "not all of it." Jonas frowned. "What?" She placed a hand on the bar's terminal, her fingers brushing the metal. The machine responded, files appearing on the screen, vault records, transfer locations, and one last encrypted code. Heire's lips curled into a smirk. "The syndicate took most of the fortune," she said, "but they don't have everything." Jonas peered at the screen. A set of coordinates blinked, a hidden secondary vault. Jonas grinned. "Well, Princess, looks like we're still in the game." Heire glanced at him. "Then let's move before they realize what we found." The doors burst open, syndicate reinforcements swarming the bar. Jonas cursed. "Right, time to go." A new target. As they raced through the city, dodging blaster fire, Jonas felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was war. Heire's family was destroyed by the syndicate. Now the last heir had a chance to strike back. And Jonas was starting to think he liked those odds. The Star Runner roared to life, escaping into skis as enemy ships gave chase. Heire stared at the new coordinates, determination in her eyes. "The real prize is still out there," she said. Jonas grinned. "Then let's go steal it." As the ship vanished into hyperspace, he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about revenge. And the syndicate, they had no idea what was coming for them. The heist of a lifetime. The Star Runner sped through hyperspace, slicing through the void like a predator on the hunt. Inside the cockpit, Jonas Vex leaned back in his chair, staring at the coordinates glowing on the nav screen, a secondary vault. The syndicate had stolen most of Heire's family fortune, but they didn't know about the hidden cache. It was still out there, waiting. And if Jonas had learned anything in his years as a smuggler, it was this. When the galaxy hands you an opportunity, you take it. Heire sat beside him, quiet but focused. Her eyes were locked onto the star map, her fingers absently tapping against the console. Jonas smirked. You're thinking about how to break in, aren't you? Heire gave him a sideways glance. You should be too. Jonas let out a dry chuckle. I usually break into vaults that don't shoot back. You sure this one isn't rigged to vaporize us the moment we step inside? Heire didn't answer immediately. Then with a calm voice she said, It's possible. Jonas groaned, Fantastic. The hidden vault. They dropped out of hyperspace in a remote system. The planet below was unmarked on most maps, a frozen world, its surface hidden beneath endless sheets of ice. Jonas whistled, Looks cozy. Heire, however, was already moving. She pulled up a hollow display of the vault's location. The entrance is buried under the ice. The facility is old but still active. That means automated defenses. Jonas raised an eyebrow. Turrets, drones. Worse, Heire said. Security droids. Jonas exhaled. Great, I hate security droids. Heire's eyes flickered with amusement. Then don't get caught. Jonas smirked. You do realize I'm trusting you to get us inside, right? Heire nodded. And you trust me because I am the only one who can. Jonas hesitated. You ever broken into your own vault before? Heire paused, then said, No, but there's a first time for everything. Jonas sighed. This is going to be fun. Breaking in. They landed the ship in a narrow canyon, shielding it from scanners. The air outside was thin and frigid, their breath turning to mist as they stepped onto the icy ground. Ahead, a metal hatch lay half buried under ice, blinking faintly with red warning lights. Jonas knelt beside it, wiping frost off the control panel. Think you can crack it? Heire placed a hand on the metal. The vault hummed, the controls flickering under her touch. Jonas felt a familiar chill run down his spine. Then the hatch unlocked with a quiet hiss. Heire pulled her hand back. We're in. Jonas let out a low whistle. You and machines really have a thing, huh? She gave him a look. Would you rather I let you hack it manually? Jonas grinned. No complaints here, princess. The vault's defenses. They stepped inside, descending into the cold, dark corridors of the vault. The walls were lined with security cameras, blinking red as they scanned for intruders. Jonas pulled out his blaster. How long before they notice us? Heire's voice was calm. They already have. Jonas groaned. Of course they have. A mechanical whirring sound echoed from deeper inside the facility. Then the droids came. They emerged from the shadows, sleek humanoid machines, their glowing red eyes locking onto Heire and Jonas, their arms shifting, transforming into energy weapons. Jonas muttered, I really hate security droids. The first droid opened fire. Jonas dove sideways, rolling behind a metal crate as blaster bolts scorched the walls. Heire moved faster, too fast. She was already in motion, weaving between the droids like she knew how they operated. She touched a control panel on the wall. The droids flickered. Jonas saw his opening. He fired 3 precise shots, dropping 2 droids instantly. Heire turned to the last one, raising her hand. The machine jerked, sparks flying from its circuits as it collapsed to the ground, deactivated. Jonas let out a breath. Please tell me that was the last of them. Heire shook her head. That was just the first wave. Jonas groaned. Fantastic. The final door. They reached the vault chamber, a massive reinforced door with intricate alien symbols glowing across its surface. Jonas whistled. All right, princess, work your magic. Heire stepped forward, placing her hands against the metal. The vault responded, the symbols shifting, unlocking. Then a warning alarm blared. Heire's eyes widened. Jonas swore, What now? Heire spun around. It's a trap, someone else is inside. Jonas pulled his gun. Who? A voice echoed through the chamber. Hello, little heir. Jonas turned, his stomach twisting into a knot. A tall, armored figure stepped from the shadows, a syndicate commander. His armor was jet black, his visor reflecting the vault's dim glow. And he wasn't alone. More droids, more mercenaries. Jonas tightened his grip on his blaster. "I'm guessing you're not here to let us walk away." The commander chuckled. "You led us right to the prize." Jonas cursed under his breath. They had been followed. Zyra's expression didn't change. She simply turned toward the vault's control panel. The commander raised a hand. Step away, little heir. That vault belongs to the syndicate now." Zyra smiled. Jonas frowned. Wait, why is she smiling? Then the lights went out. A surge of power erupted from the vault, flooding the room with a wave of electricity. The mercenaries' weapons malfunctioned. The droids shut down. And the syndicate commander? He took a step back, his visor flickering in confusion. Zyra turned to Jonas. "Now." Jonas didn't need to be told twice. He raised his blaster and fired. Chaos erupted. Jonas and Zyra fought their way through the syndicate forces, dodging gunfire, disabling droids, taking down mercenaries one by one. Zyra ripped the vault open, grabbing a small data drive from inside. Jonas fired one last shot at the commander, then grabbed Zyra's hand. "Time to run, princess." They raced back through the vault, syndicate reinforcements swarming behind them. Jonas hit his comms. Star Runner prepped for takeoff. The ship's engines roared to life as they sprinted up the boarding ramp. Jonas threw himself into the pilot's seat, lifting off just as syndicate fighters descended from the sky. The Star Runner blasted into space, barely dodging enemy fire. Zyra collapsed into the co-pilot's seat, clutching the data drive in her hands. Jonas looked at her. "Please tell me that was worth it." Zyra smirked. "The syndicate took my family's fortune," she held up the drive, "but this tells me where they're keeping it." Jonas grinned. "Then I guess we're not done yet." The Star Runner vanished into hyperspace, and the real battle was about to begin. The final showdown. The Star Runner hurtled through hyperspace, its engines burning hot as Jonas' Vex pushed them to their limits. His hands were tight on the controls, his mind racing. They had done it. They had broken into the vault. They had stolen the data drive containing the syndicate's hidden fortune. But now, the syndicate was coming for them. Jonas turned his gaze toward Zyra, who sat in the co-pilot seat, scanning through the stolen data. The faint glow from the holographic interface lit up her sharp features, her silver eyes flickering as she absorbed every detail. After a long silence, Jonas finally spoke. "So, what are we looking at?" Zyra didn't lift her gaze from the screen. "The syndicate's central treasury. This is where they moved my family's stolen wealth." Jonas leaned closer, his brow furrowing as he took in the location coordinates. Then his heart dropped. "No way," he muttered. Zyra's lips pressed into a thin line. "It's on Argus 9. Jonas exhaled sharply. "Of course it is." Argus 9 wasn't just a planet. It was a fortress, the syndicate's strongest outpost, a place crawling with warships, mercenaries, and elite enforcers who would kill first and ask questions later. Breaking in there? That wasn't just dangerous. It was suicidal. Jonas let out a dry chuckle. "Remind me again why we're doing this." Zyra finally looked at him, her silver eyes steady. "Because if we don't," she said, "the syndicate will never stop hunting us."